Okay, next one. Okay. As we were talking, PPH is a leading cause of maternal mortality, not only in a developing country like India, but worldwide also. PPH remains still the leading cause of maternal morbidity and mortality to a large extent. PPH, as we all know, is unpredictable. It occurs frequently and has significant morbidity associated with it. It is estimated that if a patient is left untreated, it will take not more than 2 hours for her to die of PPH, 12 hours for her to die of APH, 2 days to die of obstructed labor, and 6 days to die of infection. Averting maternal mortality is based on the prepared team, a prepared mind, and full range of therapeutic possibilities that are available to us. Postpartum hemorrhage accounts for almost 56% of maternal deaths in India, and the prevalence is to the tune of 38%. So we all know what a dreaded complication PPH is, and almost all the obstetricians have spent sleepless nights, and they still must be getting nightmares. Postpartum hemorrhage. Now let's take a quick review through the important aspects like definition and all. As all of you are very well versed with it, I will not go into the details of it. The postpartum hemorrhage or PPH is defined as a cumulative blood loss which is more than 500 ml in a vaginal delivery or more than 1000 ml following a cesarean delivery, or any amount of blood loss within 24 hours of birth, as is evidenced by a rise in the pulse rate and falling of blood pressure. That is, these are the signs of hypotension. So it's not necessary that a patient may have lost at least 500 in a vaginal delivery or 1000 ml. She may have lost even lesser amount than that. But if she shows signs of hypovolemia as evidenced by tachycardia and hypotension, it can be taken into consideration that she has suffered PPH. Now, primary PPH, if it occurs within the first 24 hours of delivery, it's called primary PPH. And after the completion of 24 hours, up to 12 weeks after the delivery, it is called as a secondary PPH. Next, please. Now, coming to the well-known 4 T's, we are all aware of this, right from our residency and the PG days. These are the causes of PPH, which are classically classified as 4 T's, that is a tone, atonic uterus. This contributes to approximately 70% of the cases of PPH. Trauma, that is lacerations, episiotomies, hematomas, inversion, rupture, cervical tears. It accounts for 20% of the all cases of PPH. Tissue, that is the retained tissue, invasive placenta, it accounts for 10% of all the cases of PPH. And thrombin, which stands for coagulopathies, accounts for 1% of the total cases of PPH. Next, please. So as we have seen that the tone, that is the atonic PPH, is the leading cause. And the key factor in preventing deaths due to PPH, or for that matter, in preventing PPH, is the identification of at-risk cases and taking utmost precautions and all the preventive measures. The use of Oxytocin and the active management of 3rd stage of labor has significantly brought down the maternal mortality due to atonic PPH or other types of PPH in last few decades. Now, what are the risk factors for PPH? Nevertheless, even if a patient is identified at risk of developing PPH, it largely is quite unpredictable. Many of you must have observed that sometimes PPH occurs in patients in whom we expect it to happen the least. If a patient is having over-distended uterus, or if the patient is suffering from severe preeclampsia, eclampsia, then it is expected that we know that this patient is at high risk. But sometimes apparently normal patients also tend to bleed profusely, and they land up invariably in hypovolemic shock. If we take a look at the risk factors for postpartum hemorrhage, the main factors that are responsible for PPH are prolonged labor, grand multipara, augmented and or precipitated labor, history of postpartum hemorrhage in the earlier deliveries, over-distended uterus, which happens in macrosomia, twins or polyhydramnios, and operative delivery. That includes cesarean as well as operative vaginal delivery, and chorioamnionitis, that is the infection. Now, I would like to, in the beginning, I forgot to mention one thing. If you can see on your screens in the lowermost left corner, you can see a figure and a famous monument behind her. You all know that she is Arjuman Bano, who is famously known as Begum Mumtaz, and she was the second wife of Emperor Shah Jahan, in whose memory the emperor later on built the Taj Mahal. She died in her 14th delivery due to PPH, and she's going to be a constant reminder for us obstetricians that how dreadful this complication is. Can I have the next slide? The World Health Organization recommends active management of the third stage of labor for prevention of postpartum hemorrhage, and all of us, all over the nation, or you can say all across the globe, it is a universal practice to adopt the active management of the third stage of labor. The three key ingredients of the active management of the third stage of labor is oxytocin administration, the massage of the uterus, and the control contraction. The prophylactic administration of uterotonic agents is identified as the most important component of the active management of the third stage of labor, and it definitely reduces the incidence of postpartum hemorrhage nearly by 50%. So it is a very well accepted worldwide practice to use uterotonic agents, any type of uterotonic agents. We'll come to it later when we talk about the different kinds of uterotonic agents that are available for the use. But it's a universal practice now worldwide to use oxytocin in the active management of third stage of labor. Now, PPH after cesarean deliveries. As we all know, cesarean deliveries have become an epidemic in India, and there is a record 300% jump in the last decade. Now, we will not go into the details of this because it's a controversial topic, and in it itself is another topic for discussion. So the fact remains that there is an increase in the cesarean deliveries, and the fact also remains that the incidence of PPH is high in cesarean deliveries than in vaginal deliveries. If you can look at the figures, it is 6.75% in cases of cesarean deliveries as compared to 2 to 4% in cases of vaginal deliveries. PPH after cesarean deliveries, it is more likely to happen after cesarean as compared to vaginal deliveries. Even the instrumental vaginal deliveries like ventouse application or forceps deliveries are also more likely to have PPH as compared to the normal vaginal delivery. Approximately 36% of the cesarean deliveries are complicated by PPH, and therefore it is common practice to give uterotonic drug following the delivery of the neonate during the cesarean section, and we are all following that. We are very well aware of it. In 2019, the International Consensus Statement on the use of uterotonic agents during the cesarean section states that uterotonic agents like oxytocin or carbetocin are recommended for routine administration immediately after the delivery of the fetus during the cesarean section to prevent the postpartum hemorrhage. The administration of uterotonic drugs or agents are very essential, and that we have already discussed. They diminish the risk of PPH and improve the maternal safety. Now, coming to the different types of uterotonic drugs that we have at our disposal to be used in cases of labor, whether it's a vaginal delivery or whether it's a cesarean section. They are broadly classified into three varieties: the posterior pituitary hormone and its analogs, for example, oxytocin, and the newly introduced molecule that is carbetocin. Ergot alkaloids, which we have been using since decades, that includes the ergometrin and the methylergometrin, and prostaglandin, its analogs. There are three types of prostaglandins, as we know: the PGE2, the misoprostol, and the carboprost, or the 15-methyl-PGF2 alpha. Now, posterior pituitary hormone and its analogs like carbetocin and oxytocin, they remain the first-line agents. Worldwide, it is recommended to be used as a first-line agents, whereas the ergot alkaloids and the prostaglandin and its analogs are always to be used as the second-line agents. The oxytocin is considered as a gold standard for the prevention of PPH. Next, please. Now, coming to the pros and cons of oxytocin, the disadvantages of oxytocin are it's a short-acting molecule. The half-life is only 4 to 10 minutes. The duration of action is around 15 to 20 minutes after the infusion, and it must be administered as a continuous intravenous infusion to attain sustained uterotonic activity throughout the surgical procedure and immediate postpartum period, obviously because it has a very short half-life. So a single dose administration is not going to be helpful. If you want to have a sustained action of oxytocin, then it must be given as a continuous IV infusion. Now it causes receptor desensitization. As we all know, the oxytocin is routinely used for inducing or augmenting the labor. And this use of oxytocin in augmenting the labor or inducing the labor may lead to desensitization of the oxytocin receptors and thereby impairing oxytocin's post-delivery effect. So if you are using oxytocin for the augmentation of the labor and the same molecule you are going to try for the prevention of PPH, there is a possibility that because of the desensitization of the oxytocin receptors, the oxytocin again may not be helpful to a large extent on a uterus that has lost its tone and is flabby. The third disadvantage in the oxytocin use is there is the variation in the dosage. The various international bodies, the RCOG, the ACOG, and other guideline forming bodies like the Green Top guidelines or the NICE guidelines and trials, they have used or recommended different doses of oxytocin. So there is no uniformity or there is no consistency in the dosage regime, which results into the errors in administration because one is confused as to follow which guidelines. So that is obviously if there is no consensus about the dosage or there is no fixed regime, then it will be difficult for the practicing doctors to adopt to any one of the guidelines. Oxytocin is included under the heading of high alert medication. The Institute for Safe Medication Practices, that is ISMP, has added IV oxytocin to their list of high alert medications, meaning minor errors can cause significant harm to the patient. As we know, the oxytocin infusion, if it is given very rapidly, it itself may lead to hypotension. Again, the oxytocin has hyponatremic effect because of its structural similarity to the posterior pituitary hormone vasopressin, which is also called as an antidiuretic hormone. So these are the issues related to the safety margin of the oxytocin, and that is why it has been related. It has been categorized under the high alert medication. Next, please. So what is the need of the hour? What do we need? We need to have a drug which has a longer duration of action, which has the simplicity of single dose administration. There should be no variation in the dosage regimes. If we are given a single particular dose to be administered, it will be very easy for all of us to follow the same regime. It should be devoid of repeated administration. So single administration, if it produces the maximum effect, it will be the best drug. And ease of one-time administration. So multiple administration will lead to difficulty in coping with the guidelines. So ease of one-time administration has to be there. There has to be superior efficacy or at least similar efficacy as that of the oxytocin, because oxytocin, as we have seen, it's a gold standard. So we expect at least it should be as efficacious as oxytocin, and it should not be inferior in any way to the oxytocin. It should be devoid of the receptors desensitization. So if you are using oxytocin, like we discussed, it should not lead to the desensitization, and the drug should be able to again get attached to the oxytocin receptors and exert its desired action. The superior side effect profile over oxytocin. Definitely, if we are looking for a new molecule, we expect that it should have lesser side effects as compared to the oxytocin. So have we got an answer for this? Yes. We have got an answer for this in the form of another posterior pituitary hormone analog, that is the oxytocin analog, and it is nothing but the carbetocin. It's a synthetic analog with minor structural defects. If you look at the molecular structure of oxytocin and carbetocin, there are few differences in the molecular structure, and these few changes make all the difference, and they remove whatever drawbacks were there associated with the oxytocin and offer an added advantage to the carbetocin. The main advantage of the carbetocin over oxytocin is the increase in the half-life of carbetocin, and thereby the prolonging the pharmacological effects. We'll come to the other advantages in the next slide. It has been added, the carbetocin has been added to the WHO Essential Medicines list of uterotonics for the prevention of excessive bleeding after childbirth. So this is a WHO model list of certain drugs which has been, in which the carbetocin has been added. If you look at this chart, these are the WHO recommendations on the use of uterotonics for the prevention of postpartum hemorrhage. And in this particular list, if you look at the carbetocin, it is recommended by WHO as an effective uterotonics in its 2018 guidelines. So it has been very well, it has a very well established safety of margin, and it has been recommended by WHO also as a uterotonic of choice for the management of PPH. If you look at the last drug which is included in the list is the injectable prostaglandin, that is carboprost or solprostrone, but that is not recommended for the prevention of PPH. It is not a first line drug to be used for the prevention of PPH. So carboprost is not recommended by WHO since they are associated with increased risk of diarrhea and vomiting. And as we obviously know, if the patient has any history of asthma, we try to avoid the use of injectable carboprost. Next slide, please. Now, if we compare carbetocin versus oxytocin, what are the salient features of both and what gives carbetocin an extra edge over the oxytocin? The half-life for carbetocin is 40 minutes as compared to 4 minutes of oxytocin. That is that is a 10 times higher half-life period for carbetocin. The duration of carbetocin is longer than IV or IM oxytocin, obviously because of its longer half-life duration. It was found that a single intravenous bolus injection of carbetocin was at least as effective as 16 hours of continuous oxytocin infusion. So for practical purposes, we all know we don't give oxytocin infusion for a long duration of 16 hours after the delivery or the cesarean section. So this is a very big advantage of carbetocin over oxytocin, that a single dose of 100 micrograms IV administration is as efficacious as giving oxytocin infusion over a period of 16 years. Carbetocin is a single dose drug and it need not be repeated. It is not recommended to repeat the dose of carbetocin once it is given. No dose variation. The dose is fixed. 100 micrograms in 1 ml slowly IV bolus over a period of 1 minute is the fixed dose of the carbetocin, which is found to be effective in controlling the PPH, unlike the different regimes and different dosages as suggested by various organizations making guidelines when it comes to oxytocin. Next, please. The carbetocin is superior to oxytocin with respect to its pharmacokinetic parameters and single dose administration. Next one. Now, carbetocin has been, go to the previous one. Yeah, carbetocin has been studied throughout the world. It is not only tested in the European and the American countries, but it has been also tested in the Asian and the African countries. So it has a very good safety profile. This is shown by the various trials that were conducted in almost 4 continents of the globe. Next one. Now, these are the various clinical studies. We'll take a quick overview of all these studies. Where the first one is the oxytocin versus carbetocin. The management of the third stage of labor during vaginal delivery. What it showed is, this has appeared in the Maternal Fetal Medicine, Archives of Gynecology and Obstetrics. Intravenous carbetocin versus intravenous oxytocin for preventing atonic postpartum hemorrhage after normal vaginal delivery in high-risk singleton pregnancies, a triple-blind randomized control trial. And this has shown, next one please, encouraging results as expected in favor of carbetocin. If we look at the carbetocin group, 100 micrograms via slow IV infusion over, slow IV bolus over a period of 1 minute. And as compared to that, the oxytocin was 5 units, slow IV over a period of 1 minute period. What were the outcome measures? The incidence of atonic PPH, postpartum blood loss, additional uterotonic drugs, that is, if these patients had to be given any additional uterotonic drugs apart from oxytocin or carbetocin in both the groups, incidence of postpartum anemia and adverse effect. Next, please. Now, if you look at the results, the incidence of atonic PPH in the oxytocin group was 6.3% as compared to 0% in carbetocin. If you look at the other parameters, that is a postpartum blood loss in milliliter, in the carbetocin group, it was 146 as compared to 195 in the oxytocin. So it clearly shows that the postpartum blood loss was very much less as compared to oxytocin in the carbetocin group. Now, whether there was any need to give an additional uterotonic drug once either carbetocin or oxytocin was given, and if the bleeding could not be controlled with these two molecules given separately, whether there was any additional need to give a extra uterotonic drug, maybe it was misoprostol, or maybe it was methylargonovin maleate, or maybe it was carboprost. So in carbetocin group, only 9.1% patients required additional uterotonic drugs, whereas in oxytocin group, 27.1% patients required the use of an additional uterotonic drugs. Again, this is in favor of carbetocin. Now, postpartum anemia, that is hemoglobin percentage of less than or equal to 10. In the carbetocin group, the number of patients in which there was postpartum anemia was 9.1% as compared to 18.4% in the oxytocin. And what was the conclusion drawn from this study? The intravenous carbetocin is more effective than intravenous oxytocin for the prevention of atonic PPH among singleton pregnancies with at least one risk factor for PPH. So that goes in favor of carbetocin. Next one. These are different studies, like carbetocin versus oxytocin was again tested in the management of third stage of labor during vaginal delivery in the Bangladesh Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Next, please. So they showed the superiority of carbetocin. The dosage used was in patients who were allocated to the carbetocin arm, it was the same because it is going to be the same for carbetocin, IV 100 micrograms over a period of 1 minute, IV bolus. In the oxytocin group, now you can see the earlier study showed the use of oxytocin as an infusion, IV infusion of 5 units over a period of 1 minute. Now this study in the oxytocin arm, they gave intramuscular 10 units of oxytocin. And the outcome measures were the same. That is the amount of blood loss in 24 hours, that massive blood loss, need for additional uterotonic therapies, and adverse effect. So the outcome, if you look at the outcomes, the carbetocin group, you can see all the outcome measures as far as the primary PPH, massive blood loss, and immediate blood transfusion, need for immediate blood transfusion, need for additional uterotonics. None of the patients required any of these supportive treatments. Whereas in the oxytocin group, there were few patients in every outcome measures. And looking at the average amount of blood loss in the last, which was 325 ml in the carbetocin group as compared to the 389 ml of the oxytocin group. No significant difference regarding side effects between the group. So side effects, because the safety profile is more or less the same, because it's an analog of the oxytocin itself. Can we move on? Yeah. Carbetocin appears to be a superior drug in the active management of the third stage of labor. In vaginal delivery, carbetocin can be considered as a good alternative to oxytocin in the active management of the third stage of labor in vaginal delivery. Next one, please. Now, this is oxytocin versus carbetocin, prevention of PPH following cesarean, which has appeared in the International Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Next, please. Again, that's a comparison of misoprostol sublingually 400 micrograms and the other two arms being oxytocin IV, 10 units of oxytocin followed by neonatal delivery, following the neonatal delivery, and 20 international units. So you can see that the manipulation in the carbetocin arm is the same in all the studies, whether you use it with oxytocin intramuscular, whether you use it as a 5 units intravenous infusion, or whether you use it as a 10 units oxytocin infusion, it is going to be the same. But in the oxytocin arm and the other uterotonic drugs, it is going to be different. So coming to the outcomes, the additional uterotonics need was only 6% in carbetocin as compared to 13 and 22% in the oxytocin and the misoprostol group. Blood loss, again, it was the least in the carbetocin group as compared to the other two arms. Bleeding between 500 ml to 1000 ml was in 20% as compared to the 34 and 47% of the misoprostol arm. And only in the carbetocin group, no patient required any blood transfusion to be given, whereas in oxytocin and the misoprostol group, one patients, they needed to be given blood transfusion. So there is no significant difference regarding side effects between oxytocin and carbetocin. Side effects are reported highest in the misoprostol group. That is why the WHO has not recommended the prostaglandins as the first line management pharmacological agents in the treatment of postpartum hemorrhage. The additional uterotonics were frequently needed, less frequently by patients treated with carbetocin. And the carbetocin appears to be an effective alternative to compare to oxytocin and misoprostol for the prevention of atonic and following the atonic PPH following the cesarean delivery. Next, please. I think we can skip these studies. We'll just have a quick flipping through these titles because they are different scenarios where carbetocin and oxytocin was used, or some studies where additional uterotonic agents like misoprostol or maybe carboprostol was used. Next, please. So in nutshell, in all the studies that were conducted, the carbetocin has proved superior to either oxytocin alone or oxytocin in combination with misoprostol, and it has been proved beyond doubt that the carbetocin is superior over a combination of even oxytocin and misoprostol with respect to all the efficacy parameters. The outcome parameters are also almost the same in all the studies. Next, please. Next, please. I think we can skip through this. Again, this is the same thing, carbetocin versus oxytocin plus ergometrin, methyl ergometrin. So this has also shown the superiority of the carbetocin. So now coming to the most important, the Cochrane collaboration. What is the author's conclusion in the Cochrane's collaboration? For women who undergo cesarean section, resulted in significant reduction in the need for therapeutic uterotonics compared to oxytocin. Carbetocin is associated with less blood loss in the prevention of PPH for women who have vaginal deliveries and is associated with significantly fewer side effects. This is a very important observation from the Cochrane collaboration author. Carbetocin versus oxytocin after cesarean delivery. Again, these are the studies showing the same superior efficacy of carbetocin over oxytocin. Next, please. I think we can skip these trials because that is the same observation in all the studies. Yeah. Carbetocin versus carboprost. Now, carboprost is always a second line agent in the management of the PPH, as we have seen. Even the WHO has recommended it to be a second line pharmacological agent to be used as a uterotonic. Whereas the carbetocin is the first line agent in the PPH. It can replace the oxytocin. Not recommended by WHO in the management of PPH, that is the carboprost, because of the higher incidence of side effects like vomiting, diarrhea, and its use could prove to be dangerous in patients who are asthmatic or having some respiratory problems. Whereas carbetocin is recommended by WHO in the management of patients who are having PPH. The carboprost is associated with what we have seen already. The last 2 points we have already covered. Next, please. Now, management of the third stage of labor during the vaginal delivery in patients with singleton pregnancy, in patients with high-risk pregnancy, as well as the prevention of PPH following the cesarean delivery in patients with elective C-section delivery, in patients with high-risk cesarean section, and in patients with twin pregnancy also it can be used. Next, please. Carbetocin is proved to be superior over oxytocin, as is evidenced by the findings of all the randomized controlled trials which we have gone through so far. It is superior to oxytocin, not only oxytocin, but other uterotonics also with respect to prevention of PPH, estimated blood loss after delivery, need of additional uterotonic agents for these patients, decrease in hemoglobin levels postpartum, need for blood transfusion intrapartum or postpartum, and perception of pain. This is an added advantage of carbetocin. And the side effect profile is also better as compared to the oxytocin. Next one. Now, carbetocin, let's take an insight into the Indian scenario. Now, this champion trial was conducted across 23 centers in 10 countries, and that included India as well. It's a heat stable carbetocin versus oxytocin to prevent hemorrhage after vaginal birth. This was the champion trial. Next, please. The carbetocin proved to be non-inferior. So if you look at this study, this is this you can call it a inferiority assessment study. So what the study has proved that it may not be superior, but it is not inferior to oxytocin with ease of single dose administration. So carbetocin has proved to be not superior to oxytocin, but it is as efficacious as oxytocin with added advantages that it has a good safety profile as compared to oxytocin as far as the hyponatremia is concerned, or the hypotension with the continuous intravenous infusion is concerned. It's more, it's time from the administration to the onset of action is concerned. Its half-life is concerned. So this is a non-inferiority study which proves carbetocin to be as efficacious as the oxytocin. Next, please. Now, AICOG 2019, also you can find this article in the souvenir of the AICOG 2019, which proves the superiority of carbetocin over oxytocin, and it was discussed in AICOG. Next, please. This is the product profile. This has, as already told to you, this has been introduced in India for the first time by Blisung Pharmaceuticals under the brand name of Carbesine, and it is available as a 1 ml ampule which contains 100 micrograms per ml of the drug, and it is to be used for the prevention of uterine atony and excessive bleeding following delivery of the infant. That is what we call as PPH by cesarean section or vaginal delivery. It must be administered after the delivery of the infant, which is a very important point to be noted. Now, dosage and administration in cesarean section, a single dose of 100 micrograms, that is 1 ml in the same packing in which it is available, should be administered intravenously as a bolus injection slowly over a period of 1 minute after the delivery of the infant. And the same holds true for the vaginal delivery. A single dose of 100 micrograms, that is 1 ml, should be administered after delivery of the infant for the active management of the third stage of labor intravenously as a bolus injection slowly over a 1 minute. So as we discussed that there is no variation in the dose regime, or there is no variation in the manner in which you have to give, whether it's a cesarean delivery or whether it's a vaginal delivery, whether it's an instrumental vaginal delivery, and world over the dosage regime is the same, and it's a single dose administration drug. Next, please. Now coming to the summary, what are the points to ponder on? Carbetocin is superior over the oxytocin with respect to prevention of PPH, blood loss after delivery, need of additional uterotonic agents, deviation in hemoglobin levels, need of blood transfusion, perception of pain, and side effect profile. Carbetocin is superior over ergot alkaloids with respect to prevention of PPH, blood loss after delivery, need of additional uterotonic agents, need of blood transfusion, and better side effect profile as compared to the ergot alkaloids, which cannot be used in certain conditions like severe preeclampsia or eclampsia. Carbetocin is superior over the prostaglandin analogs, that is all the analogs of the prostaglandin which we normally use in the management of PPH, that is misoprostol and carboprost, with respect to prevention of PPH, blood loss after delivery, need of additional uterotonic agents. The drawbacks of PG analogs, that is prostaglandin analogs, as we have already discussed, is it's a second line agent, is need of multiple doses, not recommended by WHO as a first line management, is associated with significant increase in vomiting and diarrhea. The carbetocin has proved to be the most efficient uterotonic and was most awaited uterotonic, and now it has arrived in India. Thank you everybody for your patient listening. If you have any questions, I would be glad to take them.
Dr. Ashwin sir, really, Dr. Ashwin sir, really yes. Your talk was so elaborative and excellent, and you focus on each and every aspect of uterotonics and superiority of carbetocin over oxytocin, and you cleared all doubts very nicely. Thank you, sir. I request you, please look on questions in chat box.
Yes. Oh. Dr. Shubhangi Mundara madam has asked about the contraindications. There are no contraindications as such, but it has to be used in caution with patients with hepatic and renal impairment, and in patients of asthma also it has to be used with caution. But there are no absolute contraindications as such to the use of carbetocin, because we know that oxytocin we have been using in almost all the conditions. Even severe preeclampsia, eclampsia and other conditions are not contraindications to oxytocin. So whatever is true for oxytocin goes with the carbetocin also, as it is nothing but a synthetic analog of carbetocin. This is not a, some few people have made some comments also. Oh, if you can it be repeated again? Dr. Shubhangi madam has asked about this. No, it is a single dose administration drug. It cannot be repeated. And if you feel that the patient has not got the desired effect after a single IV bolus of 100 micrograms of carbetocin and she's still bleeding, or the uterus is still not contracted and you need to do something, so you are then advised to use other uterotonic agents like maybe methyl ergometrin or maybe the prostaglandin analogs as per your choice, but it cannot be repeated. Do we need to wait for the placenta to come before the administration? No, carbetocin you don't need, you don't have to wait for the placenta to deliver. You can use it immediately after the delivery of the baby, and it will hasten the delivery of the placenta as well. So you don't need to wait till the placenta is delivered before you go for carbetocin administration. Would it be reserved only for PPH? Dr. Rashmi Nagalkar has asked. No, it is to be used as a replacement of oxytocin routinely in the active management of third stage of labor. You don't wait for the patient to have PPH and then use the carbetocin. It can be used routinely in replacement of oxytocin because of the obvious advantages that we have discussed. Dr. Pushpa Zungare madam has asked about what is the cost. I think the cost to the doctor is somewhere in the range of, I may be wrong, but it is somewhere in the range of 350 to 375. The company people will be able to throw light on that. But it
350 rupees.
Yes, so it's 350 rupees, and it is, yes, it has been made available in the Amravati. There is a is there any issue of the cold storage? Actually, it is a heat stable molecule, but I think the information that I got from the company people is that they have applied for the heat patent, heat stable molecule preparation patent, but they have not yet got that patent. And that is why they have advised to store it at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. At the moment they have advised. But the international trials they have conducted with the heat stable molecule. So it is going to be a heat stable. It is just a matter of time. I think when Blisson receives that patent, they will also inform us that now it can be stored at room temperature also.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So sometimes we use oxytocin before delivery. So
Yes.
after delivery, we can use
yes.
this?
Yes, yes. If you have used oxytocin for the induction or augmentation of the labor, you can definitely use carbetocin as a uterotonic agent in the active management of third stage of labor. After the baby is delivered, you can give 100 micrograms, that is 1 ml, bolus IV infusion, bolus IV administration over a period of 1 minute. It will not interfere with the oxytocin receptors. Alka Kuthe madam has commented correctly. It is not for induction, not at all. It is not to be used antenatally in any case. It is to be administered only after the delivery of the baby. Then can we use in asthmatic patients yet? Yes, we can use it, but definitely we have to be cautious and we have to pay attention to the oxygen saturation and the respiratory rate, but it is not an absolute contraindication. You can very well use it in asthmatic patients also.
Sir, your talk was excellent.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Now I request Dr. Rashmi Nagalkar to present case. Dr. Rashmi is enthusiastic, energetic lady of OBGY Society Amravati, doing obstetric gynec practice at Nagalkar Nursing Home since 2009. She is certified assessor for Manyata and Baldrick program for healthcare. She is past president of Innerville Club of Amravati, past president of JCI Amravati Golden. She is active member of Rotary Club of Amravati Ambanagri. I request such multifactorial social personality to start with case presentation. Dr. Rashmi Nagalkar, over to you. Hello.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, Dr. Mangal Rathi, madam, for a kind introduction. Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, madam.
And at the outset, I would also like to thank the president, Dr. Meenal Deshmukh, ma'am, and secretary, Dr. Shalaka Bari, for giving me this opportunity to present the cases of PPH. Today I am presenting 2 cases of PPH which I have encountered in my private practice, and rightly said by Dr. Ashwini Kumar Deshmukh sir that all of us have faced this nightmare. So I'm beginning with the case presentation. Sorry. So this is the first case. A 29 years old primi gravida came with labor pains at full-term gestation. She had regular menses. Her LMP was 12th of November 2009 and EDD was 19th of August. Her medical, surgical, and family personal history was not significant. On examination, her general condition was moderate, febrile. Pulse was 82 per minute. BP was 110 by 70 mm of Hg. On systemic examination, her respiratory tract was clear and CVS was NAD. Per abdominal examination, uterus was full term with 2 contractions per 10 minutes. Cephalic, fixed, left occipito anterior, and fetal heart rate was regular, 145 minutes per minute. On PV examination, she was 3 centimeter dilated, 80% effaced. Station was -1, membrane present, and pelvis was adequate. On her investigation, hemoglobin was 8.2 gram%. Her blood group was O positive. HIV, HbSAg, and VDRL negative. Platelets 1,55,000 per cubic millimeter, and urine routine was within normal limits. She progressed smoothly and started bearing down at 10:30 p.m. Per abdominally, her uterus was full term with 3 to 4 contractions of 40 seconds per 10 minutes. FHS was 145 per minute and regular. On per vaginal examination, she was fully dilated, fully effaced, membranes absent, and station was +1. This patient was my relative and she was very uncooperative. She was not at all ready to bear down, and so I offered them LSCS, for which also they were not ready. And these were the initial days of my practice. I again reassessed her and bladder was catheterized. I applied Ventus, but it slipped. So I took the decision of forceps delivery and explained the relatives' consent was taken. Forceps delivery was done. Female child cried just after birth. Now the third stage of labor, I told the staff to put injection oxytocin 10 units in drip. Active management of third stage of labor was done. Injection methergine was given iron, but the patient started bleeding. She had bilateral tears in vagina, which were sutured, but the patient was really very uncooperative. And after suturing, there was no active PV bleeding was seen. In the morning, the patient complained pain at perineal region, and on examination, her general condition was moderate. She was febrile, but the pulse was 102 per minute with BP 110 by 60, and she had pallor. Per abdominally, uterus was well contracted, but on local examination, she had a tense swelling at vulva with bluish purple discoloration. Uh, I decided to explore her. Consent was taken, blood arranged. Under general anesthesia, blood clots were removed and the bleeding points sutured. The dead space was obliterated by deep mattress sutures, and prophylactic antibiotics were administered. She was discharged safely to her home on 7th day. So it was the post-instrumental delivery traumatic PPH. Now I'm going to present the second case. 42 years old, unregistered patient, Gravida 4, Para 2, Living 2, Abortion 1, came to my hospital with full-term gestation. Her first two deliveries were full-term normal deliveries, and she had 2 female child, one 21 years and second was 18 years, and third was MTP, and fourth is this present pregnancy. She had regular menstrual history. Her medical, surgical, family, and personal history was not significant. On examination, her general condition was moderate, febrile, pulse 82 per minute, and BP was 110 by 70 mm of Hg, and there was no on systemic RS, CVS were NAD. Per abdominally, uterus full term, relaxed, cephalic, fixed, left occipito anterior, and fetal heart was regular. On per vaginal examination, she was 1 finger loose, 50% effaced, station was -1, membrane present, and pelvis was adequate. Her investigation showed hemoglobin 10.6 gram%, blood group B positive, HIV, HbSAg, VDRL negative, platelets 1,30,000, and urine routine was within normal limit. I induced her by putting Serviprime gel, and after 8 hours started Pitocin drip 2.5 units. She progressed well, started bearing down. But on PV examination, she had hand prolapse. Counseling was done for emergency LSCS. We delivered baby girl, cried just after birth, uterus sutured in 2 layers, but the anesthetist warned us about hypotension and tachycardia. So he asked us to explore again. There was no bleeding from the suture line. So we delivered the uterus out and found a big rent on the posterior wall of uterus. We called senior gynecologist and another anesthetist for help. Counseling of patient's relative was done by pediatrician about uterine rupture and hypotension. So blood was arranged, wide bore cannula put on the second hand, and fluid started. The rent was sutured, but by this time she was having atonic PPH. All the uterotonics given, but the condition was deteriorating, so decision of obstetric hysterectomy taken. We did the hysterectomy uneventfully, but by that time she was in hypotension and was shifted to ICU for 3 days. Then after here, she was shifted to Nagpur for further management and ICU care. Finally, we saved her just because of a good team effort. I will like to share the mistakes I have done in these cases. I had not anticipated PPH in spite of her age and gravidity, and it was an unnecessary induction, as we think for this case retrospectively. So the take-home message is be PPH minded. We have to anticipate the risk factors in each and every case, call for help as early as possible. Here in Amravati, we are very blessed to have such an good team of obstetricians, anesthetists. I'm really thankful to Dr. Somvanshi madam and Dr. Lalita Dumi madam, and also to Dr. Ingole sir and Vijay sir, who helped me in both these cases, and make it a habit to explore the posterior wall of uterus also. Train the staff by doing PPH drills regularly. Here, most of the times we fail. We ourselves are very much trained, but we are lacking in the skills to inculcate in our staff. So from that incidents, I have started PPH drill, eclampsia drill, because these patients are not regularly encountered. So the staff should be trained by these drills only. Thank you. Thank you very much for patient listening.
You nicely elaborated case of instrumental PPH and anticipation factors for PPH. I request you, please have a look in chat box for any questions. Are there questions?
No.
No questions means no confusion. Everything is clear. You nicely elaborated case. Okay. I request Secretary OBGYN Society, Dr. Mrs. Shalaka Bari, for vote of thanks.
Thank you, madam. So as we come to the end of the webinar on Carbetocin, an interesting case presentation session, I extend my thanks to Dr. Ashwini Kumar Deshmukh sir for the detailed and elaborate talk. Thank you, Rashmi Nakalkar, for your case presentation. Your take-home message was awesome. Be PPH minded. I think that should be a tagline. Thank you, Dr. Mangal Rathi madam, for meticulously moderating the session. I thank you, Blisson Education Partners, Mr. Sharad Joshi, Mr. Mahesh Navgire, and Mr. Sham Kaure. Thank you all the respected seniors and my dear members for attending the session. Over to Mr. Parag.
Yeah, thank you everybody. On behalf of Blisson, I am thankful for Amravati Obs and Gynae Society for giving us the opportunity Dr. Ashwini Kumar Deshmukh sir for giving an excellent talk, and also Dr. Rashmi. Thank you very much. And I would like to say that the Carbesin is available in Amravati. In the chat box, we have given the mobile number of our colleagues who will deliver the product in case you require, you have any order. Please contact them. They will be happy to serve you.